Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to talk about something that's a little bit negative. I don't necessarily feel that it's negative, but I know some people do. What I'm going to be talking about today is DNFing books. So I am definitely somebody who DNFs books. Now I don't do it often. I do try to give books the benefit of the doubt because I have had ones where I wasn't feeling it in the beginning and they ended up being something I really loved in the end. But if I get a good chunk into the book and I'm not enjoying it, life is too short to read books we don't like. So this year I did end up DNFing 4 books. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the 4 books that I DNF'd and why. I have talked a little bit about each of these throughout the year in the wrap-ups or with the case of one of them. I did make an entire video. I will link that down below if you want to see a little bit more about that. And let's get into the books. The first book that I DNF'd this year was The Secret Life of Violet Grant. This book. So I picked up this one and a couple of other books by Beatrice Williams because she's part of this kind of friend group of authors that writes historical fiction. Lauren Willig is the author of the 3 that I've gotten really into, and I've read everything she's ever written at this point, and she's fantastic. Great writer, writes really wonderful characters. Yes, there are tropes in her books, but I think they're handled really well and they don't define the plot. What I really didn't like about this book in particular is that Williams uses all kinds of tropes and it is super insta-lovey. Within the first like 5 chapters, the main character has already met a random stranger at a post office, had him carry her package all the way back to her apartment, and then let him sleep on her couch, snuggled up next to him, had him talk to her mom. So it's like this really weird progression, and like we're made to think that like they are meant to be and this is love, and they just don't know each other. Like half of that whole time he's sleeping, and it's just really weird and it was uncomfortable. The plot just didn't feel like it was going anywhere, and the audiobook narrator was terrible, so that didn't help it. It didn't really hurt it because the book itself was not something I was enjoying anyways, so I ended up deciding that Beatrice Williams is just not a writer for me, and DNFing that book and getting rid of the rest of the books that I owned that were by her because I just wasn't gonna waste my time. And then I started the book The Handsworth Times, which came in a moth box. And with this one, the writing of the book was really good, but I just wasn't super interested in the plot. So it was very nitty gritty, and it was something that I felt like I should be interested in. And it was one of those books that I was like, I want to finish this, but I don't want to finish this. And I just ended up feeling like I couldn't connect with any of the characters, and I just found a lot of them to be super unlikable, and not in a just like I don't like the characters way, but in a way that I just could not bring myself to care what was happening. The next 2 I have a little bit more rage or feeling on. The first one is The Last Cavalier by Alexander Dumas. So this is a book that is like this big, okay? It's huge. It's much longer than even The Count of Monte Cristo. And it's a book that was published posthumously, and it really probably shouldn't have been. So Alexander Dumas never really, from what I understand, never really had the opportunity to edit this book. So it ends up just being this just historical word vomit. So the whole premise of the story is that we're following the last cavalier, and the story's supposed to be about this one man. But we spend the first 300 pages or more getting information about Napoleonic France and Napoleon and Napoleon's wife and the frivolosity of her spending. And I'm sure at some point that comes into play later, but you just have to slog through all of this historical information before you ever get to any kind of plot. So it doesn't start out with a plot. It just starts out with just word vomited historical information with these fictionalized characters. Because yes, it's supposed to be Napoleon, and it's supposed to be, I'm blanking on his wife's name, but it's fictionalized versions of them. And there's a general that we follow at some point to get information about him. And it all, like, I could see that it was gonna come together, but I honestly just couldn't be bothered to care and wait and take all of that time. Also, the foreword on this basically lays the plot out for you, and that whole plot, first of all, why they do that in a foreword, I have no idea, because it literally spoils the book. But at the same time, like, that was what was keeping me going, because I was like, oh, this is going to be really exciting, it's going to get exciting. It just never got there. It just, you know, I was over a quarter of the way through this huge book, and it just had no plot, and I just finally was like, I'm done. So I ranted a lot more about this in a video that I did separately on this, and I will link that below if you want to hear me complain about it, because yeah, so many feelings. Because everybody, if you've been with me long enough, knows that I love Dumas, and I don't mind the fact that he's wordy, because he is. But in every other book that I have read where he's been wordy, there's a point, and everything matters and comes into play. And I think the fact that he didn't have a chance to edit this one really, really shows. And then the last one is the Terranauts. I got this in a Muse Monthly box. I was really excited about this because I heard other booktubers talk about this, and the way they talked about it made me really excited. The premise sounds really interesting. It's about a group of astronauts Terranauts, that are put in this dome for 2 years, and it's an experiment to see if life is sustainable on another planet, because they aren't supposed to have any contact with the outside world as far as resources and that kind of thing. It's a self-contained dome, and this is based on a real life event, so something that really happened, but it's ultra fictionalized. The problem with this is, the interesting part of it is the survivalist thing. The whole being confined to this dome and how they make do. And obviously there are gonna be character interactions and human nature that's gonna come into play, and there's gonna be drama because you put these people in a dome where they can only talk to each other, shit's gonna go down. However, the whole first, like, I want to say I read 200 or 300 pages of this, and I listened to it on an audiobook. The audiobook was fine, the narrator was fine, or the narrators were fine, but the characters were despicable. Like, none of them really had any redeeming qualities, and it was just a giant soap opera. So we spend so much time on the before they go into the dome, establishing who these people are, and basically establishing that they're all terrible people. And then we get to the part where they're in the dome, and it's just a soap opera. Like, there's very little focus on the actual science and what's going on and the reason they're in the dome and all of that. And so much more of it is on their personal relationships, and it spiraled out of control to the point where I was just like, I don't care. I really don't care. I don't want to read another minute, listen to another minute of these awful people who are supposed to be scientists, who really are just people who have some expertise but are showing none of that at this point. So I ended up giving up on that entirely, and I don't regret it. I sent that off to the used bookstore. It's another book that I never want to see again. So that's pretty much it. Those are the only 4 books that I DNF'd. Now, there were some that I probably should have, that I slogged through this year, but you know, sometimes I feel like something's happening that could get better, and then it doesn't, and then I realize at the end I probably should have DNF'd it. But, you know, it is what it is. You make choices based on where you are in the reading, how you're feeling, and a lot of DNFing does have to deal with, you know, how you're feeling when you're reading the book. If you're in the mood for that type of book, that can definitely affect it. With these 4 books, I think regardless I would have DNF'd them. The Handsworth Time is the only one that I think, had I read it at a different time, I might have enjoyed it more. The other 3 just never were gonna have a chance. They just weren't. So I would love to hear if you read any of these books and enjoyed them. I would love to hear your thoughts below for sure. And then what are books that you've DNF'd, especially if they're things that might be a little controversial. I love hearing when people DNF'd books that other people loved. It's just interesting to see other people's perspectives on books you love and books you really didn't love. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you in the comments. Bye!